Right now, we are entering a golden age of wearable technology, and I'm not just talking about things like Fitbits and Apple Watches. There's a whole range of really interesting things happening. Joining us this week, we are talking to Leah Heiss from RMIT, and we've got Jessie Hughes, creative technologist at Jospehmark. Leah, I'm going to start with you because you work on a whole range of really interesting wearable products. But let's just start with where your interest in wearable technology lies. Where did it start?
You know, I'm a bit old school, but I've been working in this space since the mid-2000s. And I started by developing garments that sense and transmit heartbeat over distance as a way to facilitate remote empathy between people that are physically not co-located. So kind of timely to the experiences that we're all having at the moment.
Can you talk me through some of the stuff that you've made?
Quite pivotal to my practice is the idea of destigmatising medical and therapeutic technologies through making them look beautiful. And beauty is something that we don't really tend to bring to the table very often in this space, but I'm really interested in, you know, how we can address the big issues like I designed a hearing aid, I've done a necklace to replace the cardiac pulse monitor, and we're working on wearables for loneliness, in addition to COVID monitoring wearables and a whole bunch of other things. So, you know, how we can create things that, you know, that look amazing, that people want to wear and want to engage with, but that also have this, you know, medical and therapeutic functionality as part of them.
Jessie, what are the sorts of things you're seeing going on with wearable technology that really excite you?
I'm really hyped about more of the immersive possibilities that we can have with these technologies. I think one of my favourite things in the VR space at the moment is with like eye tracking. And so we're building eye tracking into our headsets so we can actually see where people are looking while they're in these environments. And what we can do with that information is really awesome. Or if you imagine the way you look at things at the moment, if I'm looking forward, my peripheral vision isn't taking in as much information. And so we're using that same kind of technique in VR. And so that our computer processing power can actually focus on making really nice visuals in front of where we're directly looking. And so that when we turn to the sides, to left and right, you know, the computer processing doesn't have to waste all that energy on things we're not actually looking at.
What are the biggest challenges in making that technology work for you at the moment, Jessie?
So I'm working at Jospehmark and we're on a project called Haven XR. And the whole vision of this is the next evolution of cinema, right? So if you imagine like those horrific 4D cinemas we had way back in the day. Like my first experience was, I think, at like SeaWorld or something like that. And you would sit on a pirate ship and it would sprinkle water at you. And I think it would rock you back and forth, you know, that kind of vibe. That is trying to trick senses, whether that's touch and sight and smell and all these different things. We're exploring everything from eye tracking to facial recognition so that we can actually, you know, see people's reactions within the world and change their avatars to have the exact same expression. So if you and me were, you know, in an immersive environment and you start smiling or talking, I can actually see your characteristics in your avatar. So we're talking about these just next level, just increasing how immersive and incredible these experiences can be.
Leah, I want to talk to you about silicone skin because this is something you're working with at the moment. How does silicone skin work and how are you working with it?
You know, this is a really amazing technology. It's stretchable sensors. So basically sensors that are stretchable, pliable, they're like a skin that can overlay on the body. And the really nice thing about them is that they can be created up to, you know, 25 microns thick, so really thin. And they don't need a battery supply. It harvests energy from the reader. One of the contexts in which we're using this at the moment is looking at COVID monitoring in aged care. So you can measure temperature, blood oxygen, heart rate. And also when you're starting to think about, you know, the audience or the user of the technology, to have to wear something big and bulky can be very distressing for many people, particularly people that have dementia or skin discomforts. So having the adaptability of this kind of very thin, very pliable sensors is really exciting. And so one of the applications is the development of a pain sensing skin that could go over robotic arms and robotic feet and potentially be used in skin grafts. Well, there's another really exciting potential application, which is around surgery. And so surgeons have this incredible haptic ability, particularly cancer surgeons, oncologists, to feel the texture of tumours. And if they need to wear quite thick latex gloves, as they do, they can lose some of that tactile sensitivity. So, you know, the potential of introducing a prosthetic or a very thin glove that has tactile sensitivity built into it, it's really exciting.
We've seen a huge influx in wearable technology in the last kind of 2-3 years, right? It feels like it's sort of reached a moment. What's driving that interest at the moment, Jessie?
I think Leah actually touched on it with the idea of beauty. The Apple Watch became a thing because it was sexy and cool, and you've had these other little devices around for a while. If you imagine people walking around with AirPods like back in the day, like that would look so weird, just somebody walking around talking to themselves. Like that wouldn't have been accepted. And now it's kind of, we're moving to a phase where it's like, oh yeah, it's totally normal to just talk to yourself as you walk along the street. So the more things get in front of people, the more they get accustomed to, oh, okay, what's that about? Like I've got a bit of FOMO, like let's give it a go.
This aesthetics side of things is incredibly important and really undervalued. And there is a shift that's starting to happen now with the large players in the field, with the Googles and the Apples. But I feel like there really is a bit of a way to go for that to infiltrate the medical wearable space.
What do you think is standing in the way of that at the moment, Leah?
A willingness to invest in the spaces of chronic illness, actually. Sorry to bring the vibe down.
No,
but,
that's fine.
It's
important, and it's a big focus of your work.
It's incredibly important, and particularly as we look at the ageing population that we have and the number of chronic illnesses that we'll be needing to manage as we go forward, that level of care and attention hopefully will shift across into those spaces, particularly because those are going to become really significant markets.
You mentioned it earlier, the loneliness brooch is really fascinating to me. For people that haven't heard of it before, kind of introduce it to us. What does it look like and what does it do?
This is a brooch that's called the cat pin, and it's nothing to do with cats. It's conversation as therapy. It's an IoT device, Internet of Things device, and what it does is it counts the number of words an elderly person speaks and correlates that against a baseline for healthy interaction rates. And it's really premised on this idea that a lack of conversation can be an indicator of increasing loneliness. And it is what we think of as a nudge device. So it sends a text message to a loved one just to check in. How are you going? And that can have flow-on effects, like, then the person's mood is elevated and they might reach out to other friends.
One of the other things you've been working on with St Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne is this smart heart necklace. What's the goal of this particular project? That
is a necklace to replace the cardiac Holter monitor for people who've had heart arrhythmia or heart attacks. And the project was a collaboration, as you say, with St Vincent's Hospital and the Nothal Institute. And the really exciting thing about that project was that we were looking at creating a long wear device, so a necklace that people could wear for up to 14 days. They wear it during the day, they recharge it at night time. And it picks up those cardiac episodes that you can't pick up with a Holter monitor. And Holter monitors are pretty big and chunky. They look like a pager that you are wearing on a lanyard around your neck, and they've got between 6 and 12 sticky ECG stick-ons all over the body. And so you're supposed to sleep in them for 24 to 48 hours. And they're pretty treacherous and hideous. They're really hard to sleep in, really uncomfortable. And so we were looking at whether we could create something that had a lower level of accuracy but a longer read time. So therefore, through signal processing, you end up with a lot more cardiac data over a longer period of time.
I mean, this sounds very obvious when I say it out loud, but if you make it something that people genuinely want to wear, you're actually making, in effect, you're offering yourself a better data set at the end of it.
Yes, that's right. The thing that has to happen at the other end is the training of the clinicians to manage and deal with that data when it comes in. So you can do a whole lot of self-diagnosis. I think I've got an arrhythmia. I've been tracking my heart rate for this many days. This is what my Apple Watch says. And they'll still hook you up to a regular device and send you home, because they don't have the capability at the back end to manage that particular data set and to do any diagnostics from it yet.
Right.
So I think that's the big shift, where you can build your own data set, but it's that being able to use that data set in order to make a diagnosis, that's the bit that's still missing. And also the upskilling of all of our clinicians so that they can manage this datafication, digitisation, of healthcare and personalisation of healthcare, which is another really big shift that's happening with the wearables.
Jessie, one thing that's occurred to me listening to you talk, at the beginning of the show, you were saying how excited you were about all the different technologies we have in effect to trick the brain. When your team's working on different projects involving wearable technology and augmented reality, where are the ethics of tricking a human brain?
I have been on the bad side of it. I did a VR experience when I was in Canada, and I went into, it was like an arcadey thing. And I went in and I told them I just wanted, like a chill one. I was doing it for a research project, and I got put into like a slaughter horror. I got attacked by bats. So there was dead bodies everywhere. And this is not what I do with my time. Like, I do not like scary things. If you're going to watch a horror film or something, it's got the R rating on it. So I think probably that is going to have to be involved at some point to let people know without ruining the surprise of like, okay, this is what you're going to experience. Like in America, when you go into one of those like haunted house things and people jump out at you, and you've got to sign a waiver that says if I have a heart attack, like it's on me. The other thing is, if you want to get into like nitty gritty of wearable data tracking, it's like, okay, well, if you're talking about medical stuff, for example, or all these different things, if you're constantly tracking data and tracking biometric data specifically, like what do we do with that information? Who has it? Yeah.
I think that is one of the hugest areas of regulation and or potential just oversight and communication that we need to be talking about. If you think about, the conversations we're having about data collection, via Facebook, etc., like all of that is happening with Apple Watches and whatnot. And we don't necessarily know what we're tracking at the moment. We don't know what we're giving away, where those data sets are being housed, what people can do with the data and the kinds of inferences that they can make from aggregated data. So I think that's like a really big area of conversation that we need to be having.
And there is heaps more of this in the podcast of Download This Show. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, everyone.